7 out of 10 times, action is going to be a better thing. Default aggressive, taking action, making things happen. Things aren't going to occur in the world the way you want them to be by chance. They're just not. The things that you want to have happen in the world aren't going to happen by their own. Very few of them will be. If you sit around every day with your plate out, waiting for a good deal to come onto your plate, it ain't going to happen. You need to go and make things happen in the world. When people get emotional about things, like people lose their temper, which I have, the running joke with me is I only lose my temper with my printer or copying machines, right? That's the one thing I've ever been mad at, because printers and copying machines are evil. But I almost never have to admit that I'm wrong. And the reason I almost never have to admit that I'm wrong is I almost never put a flagpole in the ground and tell people I'm 100% right about this. I never say that. There are so few things in the world that I say, you know what, Will, I'm right about this. We should do it. I never say that, because how can I know what the future is going to bring?
Raw, uncut, and unapologetic. Welcome to Men Talking Mindfulness.
How do you stay disciplined and present? Today, we're going to sit down with fellow retired Navy SEAL, leadership expert, and entrepreneur Jocko Willink to talk about what it really means to take ownership of your life and find freedom through discipline. Jocko, welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
And man, we're pumped to have you here with us today. And I know our audience has been looking forward to this. Will, brother,
Yeah.
good to see you too, my man.
Yeah, it's good to be here. I was posting on, I just like, we're bringing Jocko on the show today, and people are already like freaking out. So, good to have you here, Jocko. Thank you. And hey, and we have a new sponsor in the show. So if you're curious about attaining better mood, physical health, and mental clarity, then check out our new sponsor, Nourish. That's spelled Neurish. It's a daily supplement powder that can really upgrade your health from the inside out. And to learn more about that, just head to mentalkingmindfulness.com. And we do we do a grounding practice, Jocko, to start. We just do like one breath just to kind of get in touch with the inside, get in touch with the moment, detach, from all the excitement we have. We're going to get into you and meditation a little bit later, but so don't just stay with us for this one, and just we're going to close the eyes for a moment if you like, and just take a nice little exhale all the way out. Push all the breath out. Empty, empty, empty. We'll take one big, a giant inhale through the nose. A little bit more. Keep going. Big breath. Hold for just a moment, and then gently let it go. Awesome. And hey, thank you everybody for tuning in. Thanks for being here. Leave a comment, leave a review. And Jocko Willink, everybody. John.
All right. Yeah, let's jump in. So, yeah, Jocko, when people hear that phrase that has become somewhat associated with you, discipline equals freedom, it really pumps them up, fires them up. But for someone who's never really lived that way, never lived that disciplined life, what would you tell them that actually means in real life?
I think in real life, it kind of means what it says. And that is, if you have more discipline in your life, you'll end up with more freedom in your life. And if you lack discipline in your life, you will end up with less freedom. So I kind of broke it down, since I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, to 3 words, which is discipline equals freedom. So that's kind of what it means. And if you want to have more free time, then you should have more disciplined time management. And if you want to have financial freedom, then you should have better financial discipline. And if you want to have physical freedom, then you need to have more physical freedom, or more physical discipline. So I think it just applies to every aspect of your life, and I think it's a pretty good thing to keep front of mind.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure you've got people who have something like that tattooed after reading some of your books, or have it tattooed on their forearm or something.
There's
Um,
quite a few discipline equals freedom tattoos
I
out there.
bet, I
Yeah,
bet,
right.
man. Well,
Yeah.
there's with that, there's this growing conversation about balancing that intensity, right? You're clearly an intense individual, but balancing that intensity with presence. For you, how do you navigate the tension between being so driven, being relentlessly driven, and then being grounded in the moment?
So when you say, are these things mutually exclusive?
No, actually, yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. I don't necessarily think they are.
Yeah, I don't really feel like I am wandering around in some alternate world where I'm not in this one. I feel like I'm pretty much here, and I feel like I'm present in the moment doing what I'm doing very often. I mean, occasionally you think about the future, occasionally you think about the past, but I'm actually, I that's pretty much here.
Yeah, I mean, you seem to be very present in this conversation. So yeah, I think that's a great point. Now that you flip that back on us, yeah, they're not mutually exclusive. You can be present and intense. So thank you for that, Will.
No, I'm a 4:30 in the morning guy as well, Jocko. Like, and that's been a big part of your life and your success. It's like, and that's part of that discipline. It also has a consistency element, which is really important. And as far as just getting after it and just kicking ass and actually obtaining some really success and results. Like, what is it about like starting your day like on your terms or and also so early that really helps you continually move forward.
Well, it's just getting up when no one else can really bother you. So if you get up before everyone else, you don't have any emails, you don't have any texts, your kids are all asleep, there's no homework that you need to review. If the hot water heater is broken, no one knows it yet, so you don't have to worry about it. And this was something that I adopted, not being the smartest guy, not being the strongest guy, not being the fastest guy in the SEAL teams when you're surrounded by a bunch of guys that have a bunch of really good attributes. And I kinda had to just work a little bit harder, and one of the times that I could find to work a little bit harder was just coming to work before anyone else, or at least before myself, my roommate at the time, who was my roommate for a very long time, and then, the Master Chief, who was old Vietnam Master Chief, who we always tried to get to work before him, and we eventually pulled it off. But yeah, and just get to work early, get a good head start on the day, and if you wanna get a workout in before the team PT, or if you wanna prep your gear, or you wanna review some radios or get radios prepped, or just anything that I was doing when I was a young guy, just getting it done before work was very beneficial. And then once, of course, once I had a family, then getting up, I wanna on a Saturday, I wanna spend time with my wife and kids, so I don't wanna be working out myself when my wife and kids are awake, so I would just get up before them and work out, and then when they'd wake up, I'd do a workout with them, but that's fun. So
Yeah,
I think just
yeah,
getting up and just, taking advantage of time where you don't have to worry about anybody else, and you can do what you gotta do, and handle things that are pretty easy to push off to the next day. It's very easy to push off if you got anything that's a long-term strategic project in life, whether it's I guess one of them would be health, the other one would be writing a book, right? If writing a book probably about takes quite a few hours to write a book, and and you don't necessarily, and since it's a long-term project, it's the kind of thing you kinda have to if you at least my personality, I like to chip away at it, and it's really easy to say, "Well, I'll just write it tomorrow. I'll just write it tomorrow, because you're doing less than 1% of the project. You're probably doing a half a percent of the project. So, if you say, "Well, I can just put off this tiny half of a percent another day," and then it gets put off that day, and then gets put off the next day, and eventually you don't do it. It's the same thing with your health. If you don't prioritize your health and make that a long-term strategic goal, then it gets put off because if you don't work out today, you're not going to wake up tomorrow. If you don't work out today, you're not going to wake up tomorrow and you're going to be a total disaster and out
right,
of shape and have health problems. No, you'll
right.
be fine tomorrow if you don't work out today. And that's what allows us to make that little excuse and go, well, today's not that important. I'll just do it tomorrow. So I think getting up early before any of the other things in the world can impose their will on me. I impose my will on the day.
Yeah.
I
Yeah, I
love
mean,
that.
I also like, getting up so early, and it'll be, like, 10:30 in the morning, 11:30 later that morning, it's like, "Oh my god," like, it's still the morning, and if I just, like, crushed, like, 6 hours of work, but also what helps me get up is, like, like you mentioned a book or something like that, I always have something that kind of pulling me out of bed. So it's, like, less of a struggle to get my feet on the ground. Sometimes it's like, "Oh my god," because 'cause you're sore because you worked out or, you just like burn so much fuel the day before or something like that. And it's really tough to get the feet on the ground. But when I do, and it's just such a different day. And also, one thing I'll mention, and you probably experienced this too as well, Jocko, is like I actually have my best mind I feel those first like 4 hours of the day that I'm just really creative, really clear, just everything just kind of clicking on all cylinders and really coming through. Um, but yeah, that's one thing that's made a big difference for me is just getting up, hitting that really early time slot. Yeah.
Yeah, and, it's not for everybody. Some people are more night
Yeah.
owls, and
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
cool too.
True.
Some people, they like to sleep in the morning, and, some of it's genetic. I got 4 kids, and one of my daughters, she didn't require much sleep at all. My wife likes to sleep. One of my daughters is just like, you gotta drag her out of bed, so everyone's a little
Those
bit
kids,
different, and
man.
I think there's a genetic component to it,
Sure.
and so I think you gotta kinda figure out what works for you, and some
Yeah.
people love to stay up late at night and even like to work out late at night,
Yeah.
and, if
Yeah.
that's something that works for somebody, go for it.
Yeah, that's probably what's become my way of doing things, because my kids get up early, like, they get up at 5. I've got young kids, Jocko, so you probably remember those days, but, yeah, they get up at 5, so for me to get up at 4:30, I really don't have that much time by myself anyway, so the time that they're going down is, like, 8 o'clock. So my time is from 8 o'clock until 10:30, maybe 11. That's where I'm hitting the gym, which probably affects my sleep, so maybe I need to reassess that, but I gotta flip that coin on you, man. The the grind culture has become something that's really popular, right? People are like, "Hey, if I'm not getting up at 4:30 like Jocko, then I'm a loser. If I'm not grinding myself into the ground, then I'm not worthy." Um, where do you find is the sweet spot between driving yourself in the ground, burning out, and then doing what we should be doing, right? I think there's a balance, right?
For a while, I was training a lot of MMA fighters for UFC and whatnot, and it was really obvious when you would overtrain a guy, and it takes a lot to overtrain someone. It's not easy to overtrain somebody, but definitely someone in a 10-week fight camp, they will get to a point where they become overtrained, and it's very obvious because a guy that was, really doing well in sparring rounds, and, you'd have 2 of his sparring partners that he was just killing, and maybe, you'd got some sprint times that you're making, some just some, burpees for time, and so you got some very clear indicators, and all of a sudden, probably, call it 4 weeks or 5 weeks into a fight camp, there'd be a day where the guy shows up, or maybe a day guy shows up and he's a little bit off. Maybe he's not hitting his numbers the way he should, and then he gets beat up a little bit by in a sparring by a guy that he's usually beating up. And you go, okay, bad day. If that happens again the next day, I'd tell the guy, all right, hey, day off tomorrow, go eat steak and just, go get a massage, go relax, go for a swim in the ocean, just do a stretch, but take some time off. So it was very clear to see someone was overtraining. And I think, if you pay any attention at all to what's going on in your life, if you are becoming less productive in what you're doing, if you're falling asleep during meetings, you need more sleep. If you're getting weaker in the gym, you might be overtraining.
Mm,
So yeah, I think
mm.
you just got to pay attention and make sure you're not overdoing it. And I think it's usually pretty clear. And then the other end of the spectrum, well, if you've got things that you're trying to achieve and you're not getting them done, well, then you need to step up your game and work, get some work done.
Yeah, yeah. I always tell people, resting before you're really tired is just laziness. But there's also a time to rest. So I like that balance there. So, um, you and I have both led on the battlefield, and it takes a lot of courage to step onto that battlefield at first, or in and of itself. But it even takes, in my opinion, it takes more courage to lead on the battlefield. For you, do you think courage is born, or do you think it's made? Or, similar to the question before, are they not mutually exclusive? And then if it is made, how do you develop that courage?
I think different people have different levels of courage, and I think some of it is developed through your life experiences. Some of it is part of the culture that you're in. Some people don't have it. Some people are just afraid. Maybe if you're afraid of dying and you're going into combat, it's gonna be rough. But if you've accepted death as a possible outcome, and in some cases maybe a probable outcome, it'll be a, then it's okay. So I think it's a little bit of everything, and but I think a lot of it just has to do, when you're talking about battlefield courage, I think some of that is just based on the fact of how much you're afraid to die or not. And I think if you're really scared of dying, then it's going to be hard. And if you're not scared of dying, then it won't be that bad.
Yeah, and I would say it's also probably dependent on the training that you have and then the team that you have surrounding you, right? If you have a pretty weak team around you, that could be pretty scary. Like the times I've stepped on the battlefield, I knew that the men that I was beside were some of the best on the planet, and I know you felt the same. So that definitely helps. Having a team, maybe it's not the battlefield, maybe it's the corporate space or something else. If you have that team, then you can lead with courage. I think step in with courage.
So you definitely want to have a good team. There's no doubt about that. And that'll make you feel more secure with what you're doing. I guess I went high and to the right on your question and went straight to like facing death. So
That's good.
No,
I
Yeah.
no.
apologize for that. If you're talking about, making decisions in the corporate world, yeah, I'm that's just a matter of risk assessment and making incremental steps to move towards whatever strategic goal you're trying to achieve.
Well, it's also it's another freedom if you let go of like if you know why you're there and accept the fact that you can die and there's like a freedom in that. It's like, well, this is instead of, not want it's that's got to be a real tough situation. I'm not a thank you for your service, Jocko and John. I'm not I really appreciate all that. But let's talk circle back to discipline and what is like getting in the way of people, like, creating this discipline. Like, it seems to be such a struggle. Like, I mean, John and I have been doing this show quite a while. There's a lot of discipline that's built into the show. Like, we found each other because of discipline around meditation and mindfulness, and we understand, like, you gotta get after it. You gotta keep practicing. But so many men out there, and probably a lot of the men some of the men we're listening to, have trouble getting after it and have trouble accessing that discipline. Like, where's a good place to start? Like, if you would, or whatever it is. I don't
Yeah.
like. What's the? How do we crack this nut, if you will?
Well, you asked the question early in that long question, which
Okay.
was, what makes discipline difficult? And I was just going to answer that. Oh, it's hard. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's hard.
Okay. It's just natural. It's
Yeah,
natural. It's
it's
just
not.
the contour of the
If
course.
if yeah, it's just hard. It's hard to do stuff. It's hard to do stuff that you don't want to do, and you got to do it anyways. That's part of it. The other thing is, how bad do you actually want the thing that you are allegedly trying to be disciplined for? 'Cause if you don't really want it that bad, then it's really easy to not take the small steps to get there. If you really don't want to do something, then it's really easy to say, you know what, I don't really need that book is not that important to me that I'm trying to write, or the competition that I'm going to compete in is not that important, and I'll just gaff it off. It's just one of those things. I think if you really truly want something, the discipline comes pretty easily. And if you don't care, then if you don't really want it, then the discipline's going to be a little bit trickier to come by. And then it's just a matter of doing things that are hard, and no one likes to do that. Yeah, there's anything you get away from being in the military, it's just doing things that you don't feel like doing, right? You're just gonna do things that you just don't feel like doing and just turning off your mind and just going forward and doing them anyways. Whether that's, in Navy boot camp, having to eat your lunch a certain way, or like they make you fold your underwear a certain way, and it's like, part of me as a human being wanted to fold my underwear a certain way, and I did it because that's
Yeah.
'cause so, you learn how to just shut off your mind, and then eventually you're getting in cold water, and then eventually you're doing, staying awake for long periods of time or whatever. You're doing things that are hard, and it's no
Yeah.
factor.
Well, I feel like there's also one thing that might help is like giving yourself to a higher purpose or giving yourself to a bigger cause. Like, is this something that can, I know it does for me. I mean, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Like, instead of all it being about me and whatever you're trying to achieve, it's like attaching to something bigger really just seems to draw me a hell of a lot more further forward.
One of the things about, like, long-term thinking is sometimes it's too long, too far. And so I like to, I don't like to tell people, "Think about the long term." I tell people, Think about the long term for a little while." But if the long term, it's interesting. There's a analogy that I use with shooting when you're looking down the sights of your rifle at a target that's 3 or 400 meters away. If you look at that target, it becomes blurry. And so what they teach you is front side focus. You can kind of vaguely see the target in the background, but what you see is the front side of your post on your weapon. Well, when we used to use iron sights, but now it's gotten a little bit easier. but you look at the front sight, and that you can do. You can look at that, and you can stay focused on that. And so it's the same thing with, when you have a goal, if you have a goal that I want to save enough money, for a down payment on my house, right? That's a lot of money to save up. And some days you're like, you know what? I really just want to get a new TV, or I just really want to go out for dinner tonight. I don't care about that because the vision is too far away. And so sometimes you got to go, you know what? I'm going to look at the vision right. I got to look at what can I do today? This week, I'm going to save this much money. And you just bring it something a little bit more achievable, something that's a little bit more in focus. And for me, again, I'm using writing a little bit today, but um, when I'm writing a book, I write 1,000 words a day. It takes me like 45 minutes to an hour. That's it. That's it. That's all I'm gonna do. I'm not thinking about having to do that for 90 straight days, which is what I have to do. I just think about today, I'm gonna work for 45 minutes on this particular thing, and I'm gonna get what I'm supposed to do, and I'll probably end up having to throw a bunch of it away, but I'm gonna get it done. So I think yes, long term and a higher vision, definitely worth focusing on sometimes. And then when that seems like it's too far away and I don't think I'll ever get to that goal. Well, cool. What can you get done today? What can you get done this week? And I think that's also and then by the way, when that grind becomes too much, when you go, "Dude, I'm so sick of writing these 1,000 words a day. I wanna blow it off." Then you go, "Wait a second, what am I trying to achieve here? What's that long-term goal? Oh, yeah, that's right. I've got this book inside me that I wanna get out." And then I think shifting focus basically between the long term and the short term is a good way to keep yourself on track.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you ask most SEALs, "How do you make it through Hell Week?" or "How do you make it through BUD/S?" Everybody says, "Well, I wanted to do more than just show up at BUD/S. I wanted to do more than just make it through Hell Week. I wanted to become a SEAL." But then when you break it down into the little digestible chunks, I think almost everyone says, "I just made it from one meal to the next," or "I made it from one evolution, one event to the next," just in BUD/S, just kind of rolling. And that's what kept the proverbial flywheel moving, right? It took a little bit to get it going, but once it gets going, then it's like it's impossible to stop. Um, for that extreme ownership piece, right? Um, what do you say to people who are afraid of taking extreme ownership, extreme or full responsibility because sometimes it feels like too much pressure, or maybe they even feel that they're going to put too much blame on themselves if something fails? What do you say to people like that?
Well, what's the alternative to that? The alternative to that to me is if I'm blaming you, John, well, then what can I fix for myself? You
Yeah,
know, nothing really. I
yeah,
could, I can just sit there and say, well, it was John's fault, and my world stays the same.
yeah.
And say, hey, you know what? We were doing this project. I fell behind. I didn't give John support that he needed. Next time, I'm going to set him up better. I'm going to explain the timelines better. I'm going to make sure I give him the resources that he needs, and I'm going to make sure that this happens next time. And that's all on me. And now I have control over my destiny, and my world's going to be a lot better than sitting around and saying, "Well, John, he didn't get his part of the project done. That's why we didn't get it launched. That's why we're failing. It's all John's fault. None of it's my fault." Cool. Nothing's going to change. So, yeah, you just take ownership of what's happening, and it is, it does feel like a lot, especially when you're not accustomed to it, but it's also for the very reasons I just explained. It's very freeing. It's very liberating to know that everything that's going on in my world, my health, my relationships, my financial situation, my businesses, everything that's going good and everything that's going bad is on me. And and so if something needs to get fixed, I need to fix it. And I've always had this attitude, and it's something that's with good leadership, as a young enlisted SEAL, I would see that all like with good leaders, when something went wrong, it was them. And with bad leaders, when something went wrong, it was everybody else's fault.
Yep,
And
seen that.
and it's just a loser mentality.
Yeah, and you got to focus on what you can change, focus on what you can affect, and let the rest kind of go. Um, and kind of tie into that extreme ownership piece and responsibility, if you will. I want to take a moment to kind of to honor two of your warriors who served under your leadership. Mark Lee. I went through BUD/S with Mark, or at least started BUD/S in his first class, and then Ryan Job. For those who don't know, Mark was the first Navy SEAL killed in action in Iraq. Um, Correct me if I'm wrong here, Jocko, but I'm pretty sure he died in Ramadi.
Yep.
And then Ryan Ryan
August
was
6th, 2006.
yep, yep. And then Ryan was gravely wounded in that same battle, shot in the face by a sniper. And though he survived initially, he lost his vision, had a glass eye, went through multiple surgeries, and then at least reportedly died due to some complications in surgery. And these men, they weren't just operators; they were brothers. And like I said, I went through or started buds with Mark, and his and Ryan's legacy clearly live on in what you speak about with leadership and responsibility and burden of command. Can you take us into what it was like to lose them, and not just as the commander, but as a man? And then how do those losses, how have they shaped the way that you lead and the way that you live?
Losing guys in combat is the worst thing. And Mark, as you know, Mark was just such a stud and such a powerful force of nature and such an incredible human being. And he was just an awesome guy. And so he seemed very um indestructible and immortal. And combat does not care about that. And so it was totally devastating and soul crushing. And Ryan was wounded the same day, earlier in the days when Ryan was wounded. And, we didn't really know if Ryan was going to make it at first. I mean, he got shot in the head and it, do- it, and then was put into a medically induced coma for weeks after that. He got stabilized within probably a day or two, but certainly Kazavaking him out of Ramadi was did not look good for probably 12 hours or something like that. So, yeah, soul crushing. That's what it is.
And then for you now, how has that kind of changed the way that you lead and live your life?
Well, yeah, I mean, grateful, so grateful for every, every sunset, grateful for every day, grateful for all the opportunities that we have. And, we lost Mikey Mansour as well a few weeks before we came home. And, so those three guys, um, yeah, I think about them every day. And every day I try and remember how precious life is, remember this gift that they gave to us, and I will not squander 1 second of this gift that we have.
Amen to that, brother. And for the listeners who don't know Mike Mansour sacrificed himself. He jumped on a grenade to save his teammates, ended up posthumously receiving the Medal of Honor. Absolute stud as well. So thank you for sharing that, Jocko. I know that I've lost guys on the battlefield too, and I know that's a piece that's pretty sensitive to talk about, but it's really important to understand what we do with that gift, like you said it. I think that's a great way of looking at it. It is, in fact, like it's like on at the end of Saving Private Ryan, Tom Hanks is on that bridge, and he grabs Private Ryan. And he says, "Earn this." That's what I try to do every day. Is I try to earn this life that I know Danny Dietz. I've got a plaque behind me in honor of Danny Dietz and Operation Red Wings and some of the other guys there. I've got another poster over here on the side of the wall in honor of those guys. So I feel you, brother.
Yeah. Well,
Will.
I think, well, I mean, the gratitude you guys are just expressing here, if the situation that you're talking about, John, it led us basically to this podcast in some ways, like
It did.
through John's
Absolutely.
Survivor's Guild. If you want to share a little bit of that, John, with Jocko, I think
Yeah.
might be interesting.
Yeah. For me to share, Will.
Yeah,
Sorry.
go for it. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
Jocko, just so that's kind of what brought me to the practices of mindfulness and meditation. Because initially, I was a young lieutenant when I lost Danny, and it was my decision to put him on that operation because we were split between the two SDV teams, and then I sat in the Joint Operations Center. I was not out on the battlefield, and strangely enough,
Were
no,
you
you
in
can.
Iraq with the rest of the platoon?
No, I was in Afghanistan. So that JD Donaldson and the crew was down in Iraq. So and I'm sure you felt this, right? When you weren't on the battlefield, if you're sitting behind the computer doing the radio and everything else, sometimes you feel less able to do something. You feel more helpless, right? And that operation affected me mentally more than any other one, which ultimately brought me to the practices of mindfulness and meditation. And for me, they have changed my life for the better, but also saved my life. And then they have given me the opportunity to pay back this gift by paying it forward, if you will. So that's, yeah, that great point, Will. Thanks for bringing that to the head. Yeah.
It's amazing, I guess, what happens after something so devastating. We move forward with more grace, with more gratitude, with more appreciation, with more almost the heart of those people inside of you. Because their torch is no longer, has been extinguished. Um, Jocko, so extreme ownership, like I absolutely love the book. I mean, I'm already giving to my students. Um, what in your history kind of brought you to this like core value? I mean, this is, I mean, it's, yeah, please, like, this is such a great book. And I think that core value has really helped me understand things in a different way. What brought you to this realization?
Yeah, really, for me, it was just seeing the contrast in leadership. And what I already mentioned, which is you have a leader that you work for and something goes wrong and he blames everyone else and everything else. And you have no respect for the guy and nothing ever gets any better because nothing's changing. And then meanwhile, you'd have a good leader who, when something goes wrong, would take ownership of the problem and not cast blame on anyone else, accept the blame, accept the responsibility, make changes, and perform better. And I got to see that. I spent my entire adult life in the SEAL teams from the time I mean, I enlisted when I was 17 and left when I was 18. And so that's what I did. And so that's what I got to see. And again, probably because I wasn't the smartest, wasn't the fastest, wasn't the strongest, wasn't the best shot. I was always just kind of watching what the leaders were doing and trying to pay attention to them. And it was really obvious when you'd work for a good leader what their attitude was, their humble attitude. They listen, they treat people with respect. And then you go and work with someone that's a bad leader. And sure enough, don't listen to anybody else, blame other people, and it's just a disaster. So getting to see that throughout my career, especially in the younger days when I was a young enlisted SEAL and I saw that. But you see it your whole career. You have good leaders and bad leaders, and I just took notes.
Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
what
And
to do and what
improved.
not to do.
Yeah.
How has your leadership changed since you left the teams, if at all? Have you learned new things since you've left the teams, in doing what you're doing now?
No, that's the big revelation for me was before I retired. Just before I retired, I had a friend that owned a big company, and he asked me to come and talk to his executives about leadership. And so I went up there and I talked to his executive team. And when they asked me the first question, I realized that everything that I knew about leadership was applicable to all leadership situations. And so that was you know, human beings are human beings and leadership is leadership. And it doesn't really matter if you're in the military, if you're in the civilian sector, if you're part of a sports team, leadership is leadership. And so what have I changed? I really haven't I really haven't changed much since I got out. I learned more of the business cases and I have some businesses myself, so applying those to the businesses is mandatory. And
Right.
but yeah, the leadership is leadership. And I think, there's some stereotypes that people have, which are derived from actual leadership, right?
Yeah.
Because
Right, right.
there's a great book called The Psychology of Military Incompetence, and it talks about the fact that the military, when you look at it from the outside, it's a very, uniformed, disciplined looking organization, very hierarchical structure, and people that are attracted to that have that type of mentality, they go in the military, and the reason they go in the military is because they think, "Oh, now everyone has to listen to my ideas. Now everyone has to obey me. Now everyone has to follow these rigid rules that I put together." And so it attracts people it attracts some people with, like, an authoritarian mindset. And what really is kind of sad is that authoritarian mindset, in some cases in the military, especially during peacetime, can flourish because if I'm telling you, "Hey, Will, you meet me at the barracks. I want your room. I'm gonna inspect your room, and if your room isn't ready and your uniform isn't squared away, then I'm gonna have you on KP duty," right? And what are you gonna do? You're gonna do what I told you to do, and so are the rest of
Exactly.
the privates, and we're gonna get inspected by my senior leader, and he's gonna go, "Jocko, great job, you're getting promoted." And so there is an element of that, and by the way, that element I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of civilian companies now, that element exists in the civilian world too, but it's over the long term is not a functional form of leadership, and especially in the military, when you get into combat situations, in combat, you if you have that type of rigid mindset, you're not going to do a good job because you think everyone should listen to you. By the way, you including the enemy, you think the enemy should listen to you. And the enemy's not
Right.
going to
It's the
listen to
ego
you.
trip.
The
Yeah.
enemy doesn't show up to your op plan. They're not going to do what you expected them to do. And so you've got to really just have an open mind and be creative and be adaptable to what's happening, and that's what works, and it works in the civilian sector as well. Now, look, are there times when you have to flex for a moment? And hey, if John and I were in a firefight and I said, "John, flank right," John would be like, "Cool, got it." Most of the time. There's a chance that even if I was senior to John, I said, "John, flank right," he might look back at me and say, "Negative." Why
See
would he?
something you don't.
Yeah, he just sees something I don't see. And
Yep.
then I'd say, "Well, hey, I need some cover fire so I can move." And he goes, "Okay, cool. Let me move over to the left. Cool, got it. Go." So there are occasions, but the vast majority of the time, um, that type of leadership is just bad. And so I didn't lead that way when I was in the military. I don't lead that way in the civilian sector. That's the I never yelled at anybody. I always felt like if you had to yell at someone as a leader, you messed up about 38 times prior to having to yell at
There you go.
someone.
Extreme ownership.
Yeah. So never yelled and screamed at people. Don't do it in the civilian sector either. So yeah, nothing's really changed. Taking ownership of what's happening, cover, move, simple, prioritize, and execute, decentralized command. Those things work no matter what leadership endeavor you're pursuing.
What does that look like in a We have a question. What does that look like in the family? Like, or decentralizing command, or I mean, like, what does that look like? Yeah, in
Yeah,
that
so
nugget.
so the way it looks in the family is it looks exactly the same. The only variable being that you're more emotional with your family because you look, worst case scenario, Will, if you work for me and you just do the dumbest things and you make this mistake and you make another mistake and you don't take ownership and you blame other people, eventually I counsel you, I coach you, and eventually I fire you.
Right.
Well, you can't fire your kids, you can't fire your
Uh,
and so we're kind of stuck with them, and we also see our family as reflections of us, and they represent us, and we have that feeling about our companies as well, right? Like we have, our companies reflect who we are, but our families reflect even more. So therefore, it drives us to be a little bit more emotional. And so, but what does decentralized command look like in a family? Oh, I can tell you exactly what it looks like. My kids are making their own lunch, right? They're
there
getting
you
ready for
go.
school, and their kids are making their own lunch. What does prioritize and execute look like in a family? Well, guess what? There's times where one kid's season is going to prioritize over another kid's season who's just doing practices right now. And now we're focused on this other kid. Keeping things simple, very important as a family. Does the family understand what our goals are as a family? Do they understand what our financial goals are? Do they understand where we're trying to get to? Are we communicating in a simple, clear, concise manner that everyone understands? And finally, cover and move. Like, that's real simple to see. If you don't cover and move with your spouse, everything's gonna fall apart. So, like, "Hey, I'm gonna go to the wrestling tournament this weekend. You go to you take the other kid up to their camp that they're going to." Like, that's just the way life is. So, the principles apply the same way, but where you have to be careful is you get more emotional, and you have a tendency to wanna impose things more on your kids than you would on your your team or your employees or your platoon, and so you think, "Oh, I know what the right thing to do is for my kid. I know 100%, and therefore I'm gonna force him to do it." And people don't like to have things imposed on them. It doesn't matter how benevolent you are with your intention, people still don't like to have even the most benevolent of things imposed on them. So you gotta be careful with the kids because, like, "John, you know for a fact that it would be good for your kids to" name the thing. Learn a language.
Yep.
Like,
Right.
yeah, that'd be so good for you. Learn a language when you're 6 years old. You'll be fluent, and that's gonna be such a benefit. So you force them to do that? Oh, force them to play piano. Okay, let's see how it works out. Now listen, can you give them a nudge? Can you put the piano? Can you require half an hour of practice, every Wednesday and Thursday and say, "Listen, I just want you to have the skill." You can do some of that, but if you get tyrannical with it, just like in any leadership position, you'll end up with a mutiny on your hands, and that's not good when it's your kids.
Right. Oh man. Well said. And yeah, what I've found more often than not is that with kids, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, man. Everything that I try, and again, I like I mentioned, Jocko, my kids are still young, so I still get the 3-year-old tantrum and everything else. But like this weekend, I tried to take them to a movie, the three kids, while my wife was out for Mother's Day doing her thing, and you know, they pitched fits because they didn't get the right freaking time that they wanted to go to the movie, and then one of them wanted popcorn with salt, and another one wanted it without, and it was like, good lord. Anyhow, I could go down a whole rabbit hole there, but talking about the emotional side with the family, that brings me to another point here. As someone known for toughness, what are your thoughts on therapy and emotional intelligence?
I suppose that's 2 different questions, neither one of which am I super familiar with. I've not gone to any kind of therapy before, um, so I don't really know what to think of it. I've asked people about it and said, like, "Well, what do you think?" Or what they you know, I've had people on my podcast where they talk about going to therapy, and I'd say, "What do they say to you in that?" So, it but I know that it's, like, my middle daughter has been on my podcast, and she went to therapy, and it's great for her, like, and she's a stud of a person, but, she was like she became very obsessed with eating and what she was eating, and she became highly disciplined, so the comments you made earlier about, is there such a thing as, like, too much discipline? So my middle daughter, who was a great jujitsu player, great wrestler in high school, and when you're wrestling, you're cutting weight, and so she's cutting weight through high school, and by the time she got to college, she's now became very obsessed with food and how much she was eating, and did she wanna, go to a restaurant with her friends when she didn't know what the food choices were gonna be, and she studied nutrition science in college, and she did a 10-week class that was on cooking, where you had to learn how to cook foods, you had to learn how to and they made all these wonderful, like, incredible meals, 4-course meals, 5-course meals, and she went through this course, and she didn't eat a single bite, and she got done with that, and she was like, "This isn't right." And that's when she called my wife and I was like, "I think I need to talk to somebody because I'm thinking about food way too much." And, sure enough, so she went and started going to a therapist and it helped her out a ton, and she's like well, you can check her out sometime. She's a incredible, jujitsu player,
I think
and
I remember
yeah,
you posting one time when she got a gash about her. If it's the right girl,
yeah, yeah. So from that perspective, although I've never done any of the, therapy myself, obviously, I'm super happy that my middle daughter participated in it, and it definitely she says it helped her out so much, and I would ask her the same thing, like, "What are they asking you? What are they talking about?" And so, I think, with people, if you feel like you need to get somebody to help you sort things out, then I think it's very helpful, and this is another thing, I didn't really understand any of this. I had Jordan Peterson, who's a clinical psychologist on my podcast, and it was the first time that I realized that people can have mental issues that a person that trains in a certain way is gonna be able to help people get through those issues. And the way I talk about it now is like when your car is not running correctly, you take it to a mechanic and you get the car fixed. And so the same thing can happen with your head that and I've oh yeah, it was he explained to me how you get somebody that's got a fear of needles, how you get them to overcome the fear of needles. But what was interesting, so it's called exposure therapy. Well, what was interesting was I have written a bunch of kids' books, and in one of the kids' books, the kid in the book is overcoming the fear of water, doesn't know how to swim, is afraid of water, and his uncle takes him through exposure therapy. Oh, first we're going to go to the river, then we're going to wade in the river, then we're going to walk in the river, then we're going to dunk our heads in the river, then we're going to tread water in the river, then we're going to swim, and then we're eventually going to jump off the bridge. And it was just exposure therapy. And it's actually something that I had done with my middle daughter, who was not afraid of water, but she was afraid to sing in front of a group and she wanted to be in the school play. So I did exposure therapy with her, first putting her, I said, hey, go in your room and sing the song, your tryout song. Go in your room, shut the door, and sing your song. I'll be outside. So she did it. And then the next day I said, hey, I'm going to crack the door open, sing your song.
Nice.
And then the next day I left the door open. And then the next day I stood in the
That's it.
hallway. Then the next day I stood in the doorway. Then the next day my wife and I stood in the doorway. Then the next day my wife and I sat in the room. Then the other kids watched. Then the neighbors came over, and then she got them into the school play.
Awesome.
But that's
Wow.
just exposure therapy, and that's something that I was able to figure out. But these people that
Yeah.
are therapists, they actually have protocols for various
Right.
issues that people might have. So,
Yeah.
as far as therapy, I think it's a thing that is very beneficial to some people, and if you need it, go get it.
Yeah.
And then the other, what was the other thing you asked?
Emotional intelligence.
So, when you say emotional intelligence, what do you mean by that?
Yes. Funny enough, I just had a friend ask me that very thing. So, to me, I think what emotional intelligence means is one, kind of owning the room, understanding, what this person is feeling, how this person responds to a particular way of communicating. Some people are going to respond to what it is you say. Some people are going to respond to how it is you say it. Some people are going to respond to your body language. So understanding that. Then I think taking it another step further is understanding what it is that they're going through. Not necessarily knowing the details, but seeing that, hey, like you mentioned before, when you were talking about somebody who's burned out, maybe this person isn't showing up at work like they normally do because they've got something going on in their lives. So you're aware, you're attuned to that. And then lastly, I think there's a piece of emotional intelligence that is knowing what it is you're experiencing and then how what it is you're experiencing affects others around you, right? You have this energy that you bring into a room if you're feeling good, if you're feeling positive, but then you also have a negative energy that you can bring into a room if you're feeling kind of down. So that's what I mean.
Yeah, no, I thought there was some connection directly between therapy and emotional intelligence that you were asking me about, and
Yeah, not necessarily. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, great
They
uh,
can
point.
help.
yeah.
Mm.
So yeah, emotional intelligence, and by that, all that definition obviously is critical for interacting with other human beings in life, and you know, um, clearly understanding how the way you behave and the way other people are behaving is really important. And speaking of kids' books, this is another thing in another one of my kids' books, there's a bully who's picking on the main character who's named Mark, who's actually named after Mark Lee. But the kid's name is Mark, and he's getting picked on by this kid, Nathan James. And Nathan James is making fun of him, and Nathan James is calling him names, and Nathan James is just a real jerk. And the kid talks to his uncle, who's a SEAL, Uncle Jake, and he says, I want to beat this kid up. I've been training jujitsu. I'm ready to beat this kid, Nathan James, up. And he says, okay, well, you can, but first you got to try and figure out why he's acting this way. And so Mark basically does a reconnaissance spy mission and follows Nathan James home. And as he's following him home, or first he observes him for a few days at school, and he's a slob. He eats crappy food, he eats potato chips. His socks don't match. Like he's doesn't care about his appearance. Wears the same jeans every day to school. Just a real slob. He's thinking doesn't care about anything. And eventually he follows him, and he realizes that on his way home he's picking up cans. He's returning cans so he can buy some stuff at the 7-Eleven. Follows him to his house. He lives in a little like one bedroom apartment above an automotive repair shop. No one's home. Hears yelling and screaming when the mom finally gets home. So he realizes that this kid comes from a really tough situation. And instead of beating him up, he decides he should probably try and help this kid out and feel some
There you
sympathy.
go.
So, so yeah, obviously, extremely important part of life is understanding other people's perspectives, and the way that you do that is by communicating with them and asking
Right.
earnest questions and getting to know people.
Yeah, I actually have on the bookshelf over here, not the one behind me. I have some of your Way of the Warrior kid books, man. I love that you've taken, your tough kind of persona that everybody like. If people look up Navy SEAL in the dictionary, there's going to be a picture of Jocko Willink beside it, right? You-
You're stuck with
uh,
it,
a-
Jocko. You're stuck
and
with
uh,
it.
and then at the same time you're writing kids' books. I think that's,
I
phenomenal.
love
It's
it. Yeah.
talking about the dichotomy of leadership. That is a huge dichotomy, so but yeah, The Way of
Well,
the Warrior kid books, kid
yeah,
series, fantastic, man. Good
yeah.
stuff.
Well, one of the thing that helps to actually the main component of like whether it's great leadership or emotional intelligence is understanding and actually getting to a place and exercising like detachment. You know, I listened to you in a human podcast, Jocko, and you went off on just this one piece of what detachment is, what it does for you, what it looks like in business in your life. And I was really glad you got to that place because one thing we do within mindfulness and meditation is we just like we don't want to be attached to things. Like we definitely don't want to be attached to our emotions because they make us, bad leaders, assholes, like, not the people we want to be. So what is it about I love your story if you can share it with our community, like how you realized how incredibly profound detachment is and then how you ended up integrating that into basically, the man you are today.
The story is, and John, you'll appreciate this. We used to do gas oil
Yeah.
platforms, and out here on the West Coast, we would go and hit oil rigs that are up off the coast of California. And we're doing one of these clearances. I was a new guy, but we were done with our workup. We were in our pre-deployment workup cycle, so we did our full workup, and I was a new guy, mouth shut, ears open, youngest guy, most junior guy in my platoon. I was actually the youngest and most junior guy in my first two platoons. Uh, but this was my first platoon and done with land warfare, done with jungle warfare, done with CQC, CQB, I think we called it at the time, close quarters battle. And then we're out there doing gas oil platforms and we're coming from the water line up. So, you get the structure and we come up out of the water on a ladder and we eventually get to this the first big level of a gas oil platform. It's called the cellar deck, and it's sort of where the real gas oil platform starts. And it's a big, giant area covered with all kinds of equipment and gear and pipes, and it's just a clutter. It's a maze. And as the guys ahead of me in the assault train came up the ladder to the cellar deck, they realized it's a huge area that needed to be cleared. And as they realized that, they made the tactical call flood, which means, hey, we need everyone up here to clear this. And so, I'm whatever, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth guy in the train or whatever. So I come up and it's left, right, left, right, left, right. And I come up and go left and I'm moving down and I'm scanning for targets. I'm looking down the sight of my weapon. And so what we end up with is like a skirmish line where behind us is the ocean and in front of us is this massive, confusing, complex maze of a area that needs to be cleared. And I'm looking down my weapon and I'm scanning for targets. And like 5 seconds goes by, 10 seconds goes by, no one's making a call. 15 seconds goes by. I'm waiting for my platoon commander. I'm waiting for my platoon chief, for my LPO to make a call. No one's making a call. And finally, I just can't take it anymore. And I'm staring down my weapon and I just high point my weapon and I take a step back and I look to my left and I look to my right. And what I see is every other guy in my platoon is staring down their weapon and scanning for targets, including my platoon chief, including my platoon commander, including my assistant platoon commander, including my LPO, my leading petty officer. Everyone's staring down the sights of their weapons and no one's making a call. And so I look at it and it's like a real simple call to make. And I just summoned up the courage. I'm like, hold left, clear right. And I braced for someone to smack me upside the head. Okay. And sure enough, instead of getting smacked, the platoon passed the call, hold left, clear right, hold left, clear right, left, clear right. We on the left held, the people on the right cleared through. We carried through, cleared the rest of the target, got to the helo deck on top, which meant we were done. And we get ready to debrief. And now I'm thinking I'm getting smacked in the head because I was running my mouth as a new guy. And instead, the platoon chief goes, "Hey, Jocko, good job making the call on the cellar deck." And I said, "Cool." And for a moment, I thought, "Yeah, that's right. I'm badass." But then I thought to myself, "Wait a second. How is it that I am the youngest guy in this platoon, the most junior guy in this platoon, and I knew what to do, and my platoon chief didn't, and my OIC didn't? How'd that even happen?" And I realized it was because I took a step back and I looked around. I didn't get tunnel vision down my weapon. And that what I now call detaching from the chaos, detaching from the scenario in front of me and detaching from my own emotions. Because of course I'm fired up, I wanna engage a target. That's what happened to everyone else. They're all fired up, all emotional, all want to engage a target. And so I started applying that in land warfare. I started applying it in urban warfare. But then, most important, I started applying it interacting with just people and making sure I wasn't getting emotional, making sure that I was seeing as much as I could see, looking around, seeing different perspectives. And it was really the foundation of my life. And then from there, again, I've had in my second platoon, we had a terrible platoon commander who was a tyrant and egotistical and arrogant, and we had a mutiny against him, and we got him fired. And then the guy that took over for him was a legendary SEAL, best guy ever, had gone up through the enlisted ranks to senior chief, so almost to the top of the enlisted ranks before he got commissioned. He had been stationed at every different type of SEAL team. He was an underwater demolition team. He was at SDV. He was at a boat team. He was at our tier one team. He was a plank owner at our tier one team. Just a legendary guy. He had combat experience. No one had combat experience in the 90s. He was in Grenada. And so he was a legendary guy. And yet when he took over our platoon, just the most humble guy, let us run things, listen to what we had to say, never like raised his voice ever. And that's the guy I always tried to emulate. And so that's where the detachment came in, followed up by the hard dose of humility from that platoon commander in my second platoon.
Yeah, I can kind of relate to both of those. Actually, I can relate to the first story from the other side. I had target fixation when I was doing CQC. So, for those listening, that's close quarters combat, basically learning how to clear a house. You start with learning how to clear a room, then you clear hallways, clear a house. And man, as a platoon commander, I got target fixation on clearing one particular room. And I remember an E5 doing very similar thing to you, Jocko. And afterwards, we did the same thing. I was like, "Hey, man, uh, I screwed that up. I got front side focused, right? There's a time to be front side focused, and then there's a time to step back and take a look at what's happening around you. Have that overall situational or tactical awareness. And the other side is the humble badass. When I checked into SDV Team Two, that was my first team. You may know this guy, Warrant Officer Johnson. He was a Wojo, is what we called him. He was this older redhead guy, and he was a crusty bastard. Like we check in, or I check in, and he walks down. He's like, "All right, guys, we're getting ready for PT," and I look at him. I'm like, "What the? This old man is going to be leading PT?" That old dude freaking crushed us. And I remember, after a year and a half at SDV Team 2, he had heart surgery. And he was complaining about how few push-ups he was able to do after having heart surgery, and it was several hundred a day still after heart surgery. I was like, "This guy is a machine." But anyhow, I digress.
Yeah.
Um, what when it coming back to the cost of discipline, I think this is kind of a similar question to what we asked earlier. When it comes to living that life of discipline and presence, I mean, we talked about kind of discipline and presence both being together; they're not mutually exclusive. What do you think from your side? What's the cost of not doing the work? I guess that's where you start living in shackles, or you kind of start living as a prisoner of not doing it. What do you think?
I think the real extreme case of that is when you see somebody that's homeless and addicted to drugs and reliant upon people giving them money so they can get enough food to survive. I mean, that's sort of the ultimate form of slavery, in at least in America, in my opinion. Like, oh, you are addicted to drugs and you require other people to be able to sustain yourself. So that seems to me, and that begins with someone that, "Oh, I wanna have freedom. I wanna do what I want. I wanna party. I wanna drink. I wanna occasionally do some drugs," whatever the case may be, and I think you see where that ends up. So, yeah, I think you just end up in situations that are not ideal, and and I'm not saying life is always ideal, like, life is hard, and there's things that are major challenges in life, and sometimes there are things in life that you can't take ownership of. For instance, your kid gets some kind of a horrible disease that you have no control over it. Well, how do you take ownership of that? Well, you take ownership of how you respond, and it's the same thing, you lose your job. Look, you got cut, you worked hard, you did a great job, the company made bad decisions, and you get fired. How do you take ownership of that? Well, you take ownership of how you respond. What are you going to do? What's your next move going to be? And so I think even in situations where you can't necessarily take ownership of events that occur. Now, I will tell you, caution, word of caution is you can take ownership of a lot. Most people can take ownership of a lot more than they think they can. You know,
Mhm.
you start not you didn't get promoted and you start thinking it's because the boss didn't like you and it's
Oh,
because that
right,
other guy's,
yeah,
always,
exactly.
a brown noser, and you come up with a bunch of different excuses instead of saying, "Wait a second. What could I actually do better? How could I actually improve myself?" So we can, generally speaking, have more control and ownership over what's going on in our world than we think. But occasionally things happen that completely beyond your control, and then you take ownership of how you respond. And going back to the question, discipline and taking action and making things happen offensively is vastly superior to sitting back and waiting for them to happen to you.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's you mentioned, when I listened to you on Tim Ferriss, 2016, like, I love it was just you and the microphone and questions, and you talked about aggression, and how, it's really essential for effective warfare, like, not like waiting for the battle to come for you, you go create the battle and fight it. Well, how does obviously, that works very well in warfare. How does that translate into life and then, like, into leadership and business?
Well, the way it translates into life and leadership and business is the things that you want to have happen in the world aren't going to happen by their own. Very few of them will be. If you sit around every day with your plate out waiting for a good deal to come onto your plate, it ain't gonna happen. You need to go and make things happen in the world. And listen, we say at Echelon Front, we say default aggressive. It's something that I've written about. Your default mode has to be I'm gonna take action. Now, the reason it's called default aggressive is important. Can you override your default? Of course you can. And there's times where it's like, yeah, you know what? This doesn't make sense right now. We talk about operations that we conducted, but we don't very often talk about the operations that we didn't conduct because, like, oh, yeah, we weighed the risks. We looked at the situation. We said, you know what? This isn't looking good. High risk, low reward. We're not doing this. Are there times where you say, hey, you know what? We're best to pause a moment. But the majority of the time, and I say it's 7 out of 10, 7 out of 10 times, action is gonna be a better thing. Default aggressive, taking action, making things happen. Things aren't gonna occur in the world the way you want them to be by chance. They're just not. They're just not. The world is gonna do what the world's gonna do. You have to, like, impose your will on it sometimes and make things happen. So, that's where that mindset comes in, is being default aggressive and making things happen.
Fortune favors the bold.
Yeah, yeah, well, yeah, exactly, and I have both of those quotes on my thing, but one thing that by taking aggressive action is going to yield is results, and that's like and then you get results, you get data, and then I can, make a change, like,
Yeah,
I could
you make
shift, I could
adjustments.
Right, exactly,
Because
exactly.
the results you might get might not be good, but at least you learned that that was a bad
Exactly,
direction
exactly.
to
It's
go
always
in.
like try, 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 try again. And kind of on the opposite of aggression, you mentioned earlier, humility, and that's like, I mean, why has that been so important for you, for leadership, for your life, and understanding that, and also like having kind of both, like this aggressiveness, but also like, hey, I know they're not the same, but yeah, I think you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah, to me, humility is definitely the most important characteristic for a leader, for a human being to have. And the reason that that has been so clear to me is it's became very clear, like I said, growing up in the SEAL teams, working with arrogant leaders and how terrible they were, and working with humble leaders and how awesome they were. You see that enough times and you start, oh, you do even an idiot like me can figure a little pattern recognition.
It's, yeah, yeah.
But the other thing, one of the examples that I bring is like the last few years I was in the SEAL teams. I ran the training for the West Coast SEAL teams, and we would occasionally have to fire a SEAL leader, like a platoon chief or a platoon commander. These are experienced people. Platoon chief might have been in for 15 years. Platoon commander probably done one or two other deployments, and these are during the combat years. And yet, when we would fire one of these SEAL leaders, the reason we would fire one of these SEAL leaders wouldn't be because he didn't know how to shoot his weapon, wouldn't be because he wasn't in good physical condition, wouldn't be because he didn't know how to work his radio. We would fire SEAL leaders because they lacked humility, because they thought they knew everything. They didn't listen to anyone else. They thought that their plan was the best plan. and their ego is just out of control, and therefore they're going to cause massive problems on the battlefield. And so that's very clear. And interacting with any other human being in the world, to like when people's egos are out of control, then they don't listen to anybody else. They think they know everything. It's just a terrible place to be. It really is. So, I often say the most underrated tool of leadership is listening. Listen to what other people have to say. And
Yeah, and that listening and then carrying it one step further is admitting when you screwed up, right? I had this, senior chief instructor at Buds. We were out on the obstacle course, and I forget what I'd done. I'd screwed something up as a boat crew leader, and he witnessed me say sorry to my guys, and he pulled me aside. He's like, "Sir, don't you ever apologize to your men." And I thought in that moment, I was like, "Well, this guy's a SEAL instructor. He knows everything. I'm not ever gonna apologize to my men again." And then I thought, a little bit later, I was like, "That is the worst piece of advice I've ever
Look
gotten."
at Jocko's face, is
Because
hilarious.
yeah, I see your face, man, and yeah, what do you think about, admitting when you screwed up? What do you have to
yeah,
say about that?
I here's a trick question. When I talk to companies, I talk to people. I'll give them this question: how often do you think I have to admit that I'm wrong? So let me ask you, Will, how often do you think I have to admit that I'm wrong? What do you think? How many times a week do you think I have to admit that I'm wrong?
I don't know, half the time? I'm not sure. It's a good
No, like a
I mean,
number.
how many times a week? A number?
Yeah.
I'd say 150.
Yeah. Like
Uh,
150 times. What do you think, John? Do you think that's in the ballpark?
Well, I would say that it depends on how many decisions you're making. I would say it's probably a one for one. For every decision you make,
yeah,
you're probably saying, "I'm sorry, I've messed something up."
Check. Here's the real answer. The real answer is I almost never have to admit that I'm wrong. And the reason I almost never have to admit that I'm wrong is I almost never put a flagpole in the ground and tell people I'm 100% right about this. I never say that. There are so few things in the world that I say, you know what, Will, I'm right about this. We should do it. I never say that because how can I know what the future is going to bring? So I'm much more apt to listen to what you have to say. And if someone presents an idea to me, I'm going to try with all of my power to support their idea. And clearly, if I make a mistake about something, yep, I'm wrong. But I don't have to do that very often because I very seldom put money on the table and say, "Here's what we should do. I know this 100%." I don't know. I can hardly ever say that. Again, if something's illegal, immoral, or unethical, okay, cool. Those are things that's different. But if we're talking about making decisions about which is the best way to go or what's the best way to move forward, I'll offer my opinion. Sometimes I have to make a decision as the leader of a business, but when I make that decision, I'll say, "Okay, here's our first iterative step. Here's the first thing we'll try, and we're gonna be able to recognize that I'm wrong if this happens or this happens, and if it looks like we're gonna be right, then it is probably gonna be this or this, and we can continue." But, yeah, I really encourage people not to dig themselves in, right? Don't dig
be
yourselves
flexible,
in.
be resilient, you know what I mean? Like, be buoyant. Like, I mean, I think that's like that's so important for in life in general. Like, this is one thing that we constantly come back to in mindfulness is like having the ability to adapt, to be resilient, to like change when you need to. And you dig yourself in, like, you could, I don't know, it just doesn't seem a good way to powerful position to be in.
Yeah, and just keep an open mind with everything. And another thing that this is very good for is it when people get emotional about things, I don't like people lose their temper, which I have the running joke with me is I only lose my temper with my printer or copying machines, right? That's the only thing I've ever been mad at because printers and copying machines are evil. But no kidding, like I haven't yelled at anyone in my family. I've never had like an actual argument with my wife. But like it's just and part of that is from the fact of like, oh, I don't approach something as if I'm right and you're wrong. I approach something as I have an opinion and I think I might be wrong about it because you seem pretty emphatic about your opinion. So let me listen and pay attention to what you're saying. And chances are you're going to be right and I'm going to be wrong. And I'm so okay with that. It's ridiculous. And it prevents a lot of, I think, emotional drama when you don't get wrapped around your own ideas and think that you have the best plan and think that you have the best idea. I think all that stuff is is not healthy. And this is something you learn in the SEAL teams. Like you're planning for a mission. I'm in charge of the mission. I'm the platoon commander or I'm the troop commander. I'm in charge of the mission. I I still don't know what's gonna happen. Like it's I have an opinion, but I don't know what's gonna happen. So am I really gonna put my relationship with Jon at risk? When Jon says we should attack the target from the east and I said we should attack it from the west, and I can't articulate to him clearly enough my opinion, well then, you know what? Why am I gonna like override him when I can just say, you know what, let's go with your plan. Let's make it happen.
Awesome, man. Well, coming up on the end here, Jocko, so much great wisdom here. Appreciate it all. Wrap it up with just a couple last questions. One is if someone's listening, not if, when they are listening, right? If you were to tell them, one place to start for developing that discipline, where would you say to start? And then the last one, what have we not talked about that you want to talk about?
I think again, I'm sorry to tell everyone this. You don't have to wake up early, but just try and wake up the same time every day and try and wake up with enough time that you can at least think and maybe do some kind of physical activity before your day starts. I don't care if you're going to wake up and you're going to do 10 minutes worth of burpees or
That's
10
pretty
minutes
legit.
worth. Yeah. If you, whatever you can do to get a little bit of a jump start on the day and be a little bit more ready for the day. And after you do that for a little while and I get up the same time on the weekends. I just get up at the same time every day, and if you do that, I think that's a really good place to start. You get up early and you do some kind of physical activity. I think that's a very good place to start feeling good and start seeing a pretty quick result, from the discipline, because very quickly you'll be like, "Oh, my day was pretty good today." And by the way, you'll start being more tired at night, and that's good because then you go to bed earlier because you woke up earlier, and so I would just say try and wake up, early enough that you have a little bit of a jump start on the day. Maybe it's 20 minutes earlier than normal and try and wake up that same time every day. And I think that's a good place to impose discipline in your world and start seeing some benefits from it rather quickly. And then as far as things that we haven't talked about, that's on you guys. I'm here to answer questions.
Well,
I
Yeah,
well,
I guess the last one is, I was gonna say, how can people find you? But you're pretty out there, man. But
yeah.
what's the
Well,
best way for them to find you? Get more of your Jocko fuel that I know you were sipping on
oh
there.
yeah,
What
great.
else?
Yeah, it's all you're right. It's pretty easy to find. Just jockofuel.com,
Yeah,
originusa.com, echelonfront.com, jocko.com.
There you go.
That's it. Just all the common stuff. It's pretty
Solid.
evident on a Google search, but I
yeah.
appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, man. Thanks for being here.
No.
Will, I'll turn it over to you. Wrap it
No,
up, man.
I mean, Jocko, I think you probably have enough courage to do this, but like you've never meditated before. What if we do like a 1 minute meditation now, so you can say, "Yes, we meditated on the Men Talking Mindfulness podcast." If you want, we're just gonna sit in stillness for 1 minute. All you have to do is like exercise your detachment skills, which are already wonderful, apparently. And we're just gonna. This is how we honestly we close the show with a little practice at the end because we want to continually encourage our community to practice. And this is part of the discipline that we bring into the world. So if you would indulge us for 1 minute,
Yeah, let's go.
Jocko.
Before we do that,
Sure.
um, is
Yeah.
surfing meditation?
Oh man, yeah. I
Is
was
jujitsu
Well,
meditation?
yeah, I'm
yeah.
sorry.
I knew you were
And
going to go
our
there.
and our back squats meditation, because I've had this discussion with a few, meditators, and
Yeah.
I think some people have said yes, some people have said no. So
So
Well, no, I mean, here's one. Let me just say. So one thing that we have a meditation course right now that's running, and one way that I kind of pull people into the conversation of meditation is like is the aspect of non-doing. Like surfing, you're doing stuff, jujitsu, you're doing stuff. But what's really helpful is also take the opposite perspective, and that's non-doing. And when meditation is just like you're sitting, whether it's your breathing or whether it's like with your giving a loving kindness meditation or just being aware of your emotions, like getting into that non-doing space is essential because like you again, like you understand perspective and you leverage perspective often. And when I'm sitting in meditation, I just gain more perspective because I'm not in the active, the doing space. I'm in the non-doing space, and I'm just trying to access a little bit of stillness. And from that place, there's just like a whole well and resource inside me that just makes me a more effective human being in the world.
Have
You
you ever
know,
surfed before, Will?
I've tried. Yes, I have, but not enough. But
Because
what
one
do you
thing
got
that's
for me,
interesting about
Jocko?
surfing specifically is,
Yeah,
you paddle out, and
yeah,
then you have to wait for waves, and so
okay,
surfing has a little less doing. Look, then there's days where you're paddling the whole time and the waves are crazy and it's nuts, but on a mellow Southern California day, you're out there and you're totally detached from the world, and you're waiting for waves, and it's like you have nothing but you're not doing anything, is my point. So that's one possible one, and, but what sports do you do, Will?
I mean, I used to be a basketball player through college. Like right now, I'm like I go to the gym a bunch. Like I'm actually just I'm a big hiker. I just scheduled a big hike in Peru. Going to see the Rainbow Mountains for 5 days. It's gonna at 17,000 feet, which is gonna fucking be
My wife
very
does
challenging.
just did my wife just got back from, M Ma Machu
Machu
Picchu?
Picchu.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm gonna go there too.
my
Yeah.
wife just did it. It's, like, beautiful. So,
Yeah, I'm
that'll be
excited to
fun.
see the Rainbow Mountains. Apparently, are they're out there. That there's this beautiful rainbow-like striations on this actual rock of these mountains. It's like I'm very excited to go. Very excited to go.
Yeah, so I haven't gotten a clear answer whether it is or is not, but, we'll go for it. What do you got? I'm ready.
And
I'm standing by.
we're
Let's
just
do
gonna
it.
drop in. We're gonna do 1 minute of just finding our breath and just trying to remain still as
We did
best
it
we
on the
can.
range, Jocko. Like, I'm sure
There you
you
go.
did
There you
tactical
go.
breathing, box breathing, or something. I did it, trying to calm my heart rate down when I was on a sniper rifle. Funny enough, with Wojo, Warrant Officer Johnson, telling me what to do, and then before getting in the CQC house. But yeah, we didn't call it mindfulness or meditation or anything in the teams. That's for damn sure.
Well, I'm getting my timer ready, so we're definitely creating a little container here. So I'm not going to go too long, or I'm not going to go more than a minute. What we're going to do is we'll find a seat. We're going to just take a few breaths, and after that, a third breath, we're just going to be still and follow our breath, and I'll guide us a little bit along the way. And thank you for indulging us, Jocko. But yeah, find that seat, and everybody that's listening, let's all meditate together in this moment. Let's just start with a nice little exhale out. Close the eyes if that's safe for you. Want to just take these 3 breaths in, big breath through the nose. Let it go out nice and easy. And these breaths are just to help to, get us in touch and calm down our nervous system. And a couple more of those in, big belly breath. And let it go. And one more inhale. And let it go and just drop into that stillness. Clock's running, and all we're doing here is just simply feeling the flow of our breath in our belly, or maybe the way it's passing through the nostrils. And key element here is just detaching, but also just being with things as they are. Not trying to impose our will or our ego in any way. Just coming back and being with the flow of the breath as it is. Yeah, we got 3, 2, 1. All right, guys, beautiful. Let's take one big breath and let it go. There's my alarm. Jocko, how was that, Jocko? Wasn't too bad, was it? It was okay.
Good to go.
I know. We
Thanks,
really
brother.
appreciate you having here, Jocko. Thank you for this, for everything that you're putting out there, for being on the show today, for all the wisdom you departed with us, and really
Yeah,
appreciate it.
well,
Thank you.
yeah, I'll wrap it up. Thanks, Jocko. Been an honor, and thank you for, again, sharing your wisdom, and for our audience, thanks for tuning in. I'm sure you got a lot from this. Until next time, everyone, take care. Bye bye.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope you walk away with some new tools and insights to guide you on your life journey. New episodes are being published every week, so please join us again for some meaningful discussion. For more information, please check out mentalkingmindfulness.com.